thank you all so much for such rich and compelling papers. Like, this is really incredible and a really amazing way to start the day. My impulse is really to open up Q&A to the audience and kind of like warm up our our brains and bodies. So anyone who has a question for these incredible panelists, please, I'll bring the mic to you, or I'll ask you something myself. Yeah.
Hi, thanks. Great talks, everyone. I just had a really simple question I wanted to ask for a rephrase from Esme. Yeah, on the contradiction, if you could like just rephrase that.
Sure. Yeah. So the contradiction is that we have this like Enlightenment tradition from the.
Sorry, guys.
We have this Enlightenment tradition in Western philosophy that has really shaped the way that we all think because of the way that European ways of knowing were exported and imposed on the majority of the world through things like colonialism and imperialism. That prioritizes this idea of the self as the sort of most basic individual unit that's like the most sort of sacred expression of what human nature is. And then at the same time, we have this capitalistic system and consumer capitalist culture that says that like all of our sort of most deeply held things about ourselves can be the raw material for this imperative to consume, right? So that like our inner thoughts and our inner feelings and desires are like sites to be harvested for selling things to us, basically. And that's like a really big contradiction in and I mean the Enlightenment contradicts itself all the time, right? But that's a contradiction I'm pulling out in that piece that I read.
Many of you Many of you appealed to the concepts of ontology and epistemology. What are each of your opinions of how many of us can assimilate those terms? Each of your estimates of our understanding, what percentage of us understood those terms?
They're big words. I think that all of us were pointing to the importance, though, of really understanding what we're talking about and of not oversimplifying things so that, right, the way of knowing is so crucial to what data sets are that, in fact, it is this whole brand new epistemology going towards knowledge that we're still sort of reckoning with as a culture. And then, of course, the question of ontology, of what actually is behind it all, comes to how these data sets are actually relating to reality, to what is there. And right, I was in my presentation sort of cheekily pointing to the fact that we do have this ground truth. Typically that's defined as the data set we chose, which may or may not have the former ground truth beyond just being a data set.
I mean, so ontology and epistemology, they're whole areas of tradition in philosophy and areas of study. They can be defined, but what they are pointing to are actually very complex, right? So ontology is the study of being or what there is, and epistemology is the study of knowledge or how we know. And those are very simple words that I just said in sort of succession, but they're like very complex sort of ideas. And it's not, I mean, even within philosophy, we have conversations all the time about how we don't know what ontology is, we don't know what epistemology is. So I think it's an ongoing sort of like multi-generational project. I don't think anyone really knows what those things are.
Hello. Yes. I'm a designer. I teach designers. All designers do is shape knowledge. So I guess I'm not really sure what the question is.
What proportion of us understand this?
You're asking what proportion of the audience understands the word epistemology? I don't know. How many of you understand the word epistemology? Okay. I'm sorry if you don't. this is a conference we're going to talk about data and knowing. I don't really understand data science, but I'm here.
Should I respond to? No, well, I think just on the subject of epistemology and ontology, I think we did all talk about them in different ways, and I think everybody probably in this whole conference will in one way or another, because that's kind of the fundamental issue that comes up when you combine culture and data. Ontology, in what sense does something exist? Does it exist or does it not? Or there's more than way something can exist. An idea exists in a different way from a bottle of water, but they both exist. So that's an ontological question. And epistemology is maybe even more important, because what do you know when you've successfully predicted something? Do you know anything? Have you captured anything? Or are you just predicting something? And is there a difference between those two, or are they the same? That's the question, the fundamental question to me of predictive analytics, which is a big deal in artificial intelligence.
I came in late, so I'm over here. I came in late, so let me just ask you, how do you handle the guider problem? In epistemology, where justified true belief is not knowledge.
What was the question? I'm sorry. Can you say that again? What about true belief and knowledge?
There have been instances in which people who have a justified true belief, that does not equate to knowledge. In other words, you can go from knowledge to justified true belief, but not the other way around. The classic philosophical situation is one in which a person bought a barn, thinks it's a real barn, but it's actually a fake barn. He then reports to somebody that he saw a true barn, but he doesn't really know, because there's a possibility that the barn was a fake barn. That's the guider problem.
So I studied philosophy in undergrad, and one of the things I learned there was that Gettier problems, just stay away from them. It's too scary, don't want to deal with it. Justified true belief has fallen apart as a definition. We don't even know what we're doing, what's true anymore. That, I think, is a problem we can't solve. What I think is even more worrying, though, is what is being done to knowledge, where so many of the systems we have don't even pretend to be justified true belief, that it's really kind of being these systems are constructed, the system tells us, and they try to justify it, but oftentimes it just goes with, just trust it, it's always right, it's smarter than you. And I think that is one of the greater threats we have right now that's epistemological, is that how we're knowing things is fundamentally changing, and we don't really have a good way to deal with that. Not even just a theory of knowledge, but a way of coping with knowledge, of reckoning with it and how to absorb it and how to actually discard when maybe the methods don't work so well.
And so as a philosopher, I feel obligated to address this question. But also I would say that so I'm not an epistemologist, but a lot of the work coming out in philosophy, especially in social epistemology, is talking about the sort of situated nature of knowledge, right? Knowledge as a social project, as a social endeavor. Everyone's knowledge is partial, it's perspectival, it's situated, and so moving towards more objective or more fruitful sort of ways of understanding or ways of knowing requires addressing the way that your knowledge is partial, and how your particular position affects what you know or affects what you think you know.
Quick question. Oh, okay. I think one topic it came up during Tobin's presentation, but cutting across all the presentations has to do with like the normative pressure of these optimizing systems or recommender systems. Are those a feature of kind of our current technologies of kind of machine learning and recommenders? is that a matter of not being clever enough to design better cost functions to optimize towards? But what would you propose as a solution to kind of escaping this normalizing influence?
I guess I should answer that since you mentioned my name. So what would I propose as a solution? Since Spotify has these sort of problems that I'm raising, what's a better solution? Well, I don't know what the right solution is for the music industry. You know, recommendation is definitely going to be the center of the music, you know, how people make money selling music. That doesn't seem to be in doubt to me. There's going to be a lot of automated recommendation in the next 30 years. So what the best way to do it is, I don't know. I have this sneaking intuition that all of them are equally good, and any would be just as good as any other. Personally, I think, you know, any one that took Spotify's optimization and, you know, flipped the polarity and just recommended you the thing that's farthest from your vector in 4D-dimensional musical latent factor space, you know, just gave you the opposite, I think probably would be approximately as good, or anyway, a lot closer to as good than most people, you know, think. So I don't know what the best one is, but I'm suspicious of the whole idea of one being good or better than another.
I mean, I think destroying capitalism might help.
I think a big part is just trusting computers less, right? It seems kind of dumb and simple to say, but a lot of the problems we're having is because we're taking these brand new systems that, you know, have one or two papers that say this works, and then saying, okay, this is the new thing that's replacing all previous traditions of human knowledge. Like, that's crazy. We really need to do a better job of just deeply investigating the systems and not for trying to look for brand new ways of knowing. One particular example I always like to use is when you look at a lot of AI art these days, it's really continuous from a lot of what was happening in America in the 50s and 60s with stochastic art, with using randomness in art, Cage, those folks. A huge difference is that the people I'm talking about back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, whatnot, were using actual traditions of randomness. They were using things like the I Ching. And they were saying, okay, it's just random, so, you know, that's the whole thing, is it's random. Now we have people using the same algorithms basically to produce art, but they're saying, oh, but a computer said it, so it's true, it's right. And it's just totally crazy that we're so eager for this technological answer to everything that we discard everything we previously knew.
Can you hear me? Okay. So just, again, same themes, also coming from Shannon's awesome talk last night. Humanities and arts can go in lots of different directions, but some of the issues seem to be like,
We'll repeat your question.
Yeah.
it's back on. Something having to do with aesthetic judgment about that, oh, why are they doing this and why should we care? It's not interesting, or, you know, the beatbox is great, but like, I'd rather actually listen to just him, or I don't, you know, have a friend tell me something and there's deeper aesthetic judgment, or do pen and pencil. But then there was this other thing which was more humanistic critique from a more ethical political direction, where there's something about the structures in place which might have nothing to do with aesthetics, or in some sense, are we doing knowledge production better for the sake of knowledge, but are oppressive and growing out of unjust conditions and leading to further oppression. So I didn't know if you thought those could be factored out, or if you thought one contributes to the other, that there couldn't really be aesthetic judgment that is good coming out of oppressive, you know, advanced oppression, or there couldn't be, you know, further aesthetic things that are bad coming out of oppressive conditions. And so I just, some of the things, I was just wondering if you had thought about the interdependence of those two themes. It seemed like they were both things you wanted to touch on. Maybe, I don't know if Esme, you could start, because I know you're thinking about the intersection of this.
Okay. Thanks for that question. Yeah, I think that those were two prominent themes across all of the talks. I feel like some of the ways I could begin to answer this is really to think about the way that traditions of ideas and knowing have been structured in particular ways. So thinking about sort of the Western tradition's reliance on knowledge and knowing as domination, right? Like as reduction, as objectification, and also thinking about like hierarchical structures that are in that way of knowing and that are sort of talked about as if they're universal or objective. And I think that that's part of the sort of when I talked about transparency, right? Like transparency is a buzzword that everyone wants things to be transparent and open and knowable, but at the same time, we're not even open or transparent about the ways that our knowledge structures and traditions are highly elitist and exclusive and not open. So, but they're proclaimed to be like accessible to everyone. And so in terms of aesthetics, I don't really know what to say about that, except that I think that there's also something in aesthetics, and perhaps this is something like human-centered also, that's like, because it seems like a lot of the judgments that people want to say now is that like not only are computers, maybe we should trust computers and they're better at doing certain things, but also this fear that we're going to be replaced by AI or by things. So like if someone can do a better painting or a better song than us, then that's like really drawing our awareness to how centered we are in our own thinking, in our own society. So.
Yeah, I'll try to respond. I think, I mean, in my case, it's maybe a simpler question to answer. Like, could there ever be a good recommendation that came from an automated system? Definitely. I mean, I've had the experience of enjoying recommendations that came from a machine before. I just think, you know, I'm skeptical of the whole idea of a good or a bad one. Basically, I think one of the problems I faced when I was writing my dissertation on this subject was to substantiate that paranoid hypothesis, you'd have to come up with a coherent measure of homogeneity. And even that in the musical domain, you can't really do very well. So then, you know, how do you know, is it narrowing, you know, is it narrowing my taste in what way, according to what parameter? Even that is kind of fishy. So yeah, I think for sure good things can happen in life, bad things can happen in life. Some of those come from computers, some of them don't, you know, and I think that's as much as I really feel comfortable saying about Spotify and good or bad.